Good afternoon, everyone. Do not be afraid, just have faith. The biggest obstacle that each of us faces as disciples of Jesus Christ is fear. You look at this past year with COVID, so much fear and anxiety. And the thing I love about Jesus that stands out to me so much is he's in full control of this situation. You don't hear any panic. You don't hear any anxiety. You know, this Jairus comes and says, hey, come quickly, my daughter's dying. And he stops a long way to tend to somebody else, and if he would have just got straight to her house, she may have not died. Do you remember the story of Lazarus? Similar thing. Come quickly, for Lazarus is ill. In the very next line, it says, Jesus loved him, and he waited 3 days. What were you thinking? He let him die. Why? Because it's just death. It's just death. And look what he says. She's just asleep. That's how God looks at death. She's just asleep. Let's go wake her up. He's not afraid of death. But you look back on this past year. And I'm not saying we didn't need to take precautions. Of course we did. But after a while, it got kind of silly, in my opinion. But I'm just my opinion. But Jesus is not afraid. And I think ultimately what we were afraid of last year is we're afraid to die. And if we really believe in the resurrection, why are we afraid to die? He's not afraid of getting sick. Look at this woman today. She is suffering from menstrual bleeding, which she would have been considered ritually unclean. That means she would be in quarantine. It's interesting, all this parallels we're going through, have been going through. She would have been put into quarantine, or what we call isolation. She would be considered unclean. She could not touch. Put yourself in this woman's world for a minute. She couldn't touch anyone. Think about that for a minute. Never being hugged, never being touched, never being, hey, good job. No touch. She's in isolation. And it says she spent everything on doctors trying to seek healing. And I think a lot of us here today can relate to her. How many times we go to doctors and we do this and we do that. And so she's in a very desperate situation. And so is Jairus. He's desperate for the Lord to come. And because she's unclean, she's not only is she not allowed to touch anyone, but Jesus, being a Jew and knowing the law, because he's God, he gave us the law. He knows the Mosaic law, and he knows he's not allowed to be touched or to touch her. And the thing I love about this woman and Jesus, they have something in common. They're both courageous. There is no fear in God. And this woman, because she's so desperate and she's heard about Jesus, she says, if I can just touch the tassel of his cloak, not him, just his clothing. If I can just touch his clothing. Talk about faith. And Jesus knows he's being touched. It's actually kind of a humorous story because he's got all these people pressing in against him, and he's saying, who touched me? And they're like, Jesus, there's people touching you all over the place. He said, no, there's somebody that touched me. Who was it? You see, when we have faith in Jesus Christ, we can actually touch God, not just physically, but we can touch his heart. When we come to God with faith, and with no doubt, she came as a woman of faith and great courage because she knew she wasn't supposed to touch him, and she did it. You know, when you're desperate, you do desperate things. She broke the 6-foot social distancing. Seriously, they could not get with it. The other day, we had the story of the leper. You know how far they had to stay away, minimum? I kid you not. You know what the minimum was? I think this is where the doctors got this stuff back in the 1800s. They had to be a minimum of 6 feet away. Sound familiar? And she probably went, on the 6 feet, I'm going after this man because he's the one that can heal me of this. I don't care what people think. I've been in isolation for all of her life. And she doesn't let fear or shame. So the other thing, put yourself in her world for a minute. She is not accepted in her community because of her condition. Think about the loneliness, the shame, the self-disgust you must have felt. Lepers felt the same way. Lepers, a lot of lepers in Jesus' day, they committed suicide. Because they were so unwanted. Nobody could touch them. You and I think we take that for granted. So imagine never being touched. And all of a sudden, she touches him, but she's touched by him. You remember the woman with the long hair, that story? And she goes in and she's breaking rules too. Number one, she let her hair down. You're not supposed to do that. That's where we get the saying, let your hair down. I don't have any let down, but she went in and she touched him. And what does the host of the dinner party say to Jesus? If you only knew who was touching you. Ew. You don't see Jesus going, oh, don't touch me. You're unclean. He lets himself be touched. He lets the woman wash his feet and dry his feet with her hair. Wash his feet with her tears and dry his. In other words, he's not afraid to get COVID. He's not afraid to get leprosy. He's not afraid of your infirmity, of your sickness, your illness. This is why he came. He came, as Scripture says, he took upon himself all of our infirmity, all of our sickness and disease, all of our cancer. Think about that for a minute. Think of all the illnesses in the world. He took all that upon himself in his body. Look how disfigured. That's what I love about this particular corpus, because that's real. I mean, we don't even know what real looks like. That's just an image of the real. We couldn't stand it if we really looked at his body. It was disfigured because it reminds us of that's what sin does. It disfigures our souls. Sin is ugly. We're not ugly. Sin is. But he takes this upon it. He's not afraid of her because he knows who he is, and he knows this is why I came, was to rescue people like her. Jesus is on a rescue mission. Look at the responsorial psalm today. It says, I will praise you, Lord, for you have rescued me. Jesus is on a rescue mission. He's here to restore us to the Father. He's here to restore all that we've lost. Our joy, our peace. In her case, her human dignity, right? She felt ashamed of herself as a woman. And Jesus had a really special place in his heart for women, because in those days, women were like, and women and children were treated like things, property. And then he goes and he touches a dead body. Another no. Jesus would not make it today in the COVID world. That man would be put in jail. I'm serious. He would not make it with these restrictions. He wouldn't. He would just say, I'm going to touch. I don't breathe on me all you want. I'm here to take it. So whatever you are, whatever you're going through, don't let shame, because this is what keeps us from God, is shame. When we fall into sin, isn't that what we feel? We feel ashamed. We feel kind of dirty. Ugh. And maybe we're even afraid. Look, remember Adam and Eve when they fell, the first time they fell, when they first fell, what did they do? They ran and hid behind fig leaves out of shame and out of fear, right? And God says, where are you? Well, we hid because we heard you in the garden. They were afraid. See, God doesn't want you to be afraid of him. He wants you to know that he's approachable. Jesus is very approachable. He's not going to hurt you. He's not going to punish you. He's not going to go, don't touch me. In fact, I think the woman who washed his feet with her tears and dried his feet with her hair, you know what I think? What I always picture in that scene when I'm praying about it? I think he sat right there and just caressed her hair. I think he just sat there and loved her. And that was probably the first time she's ever really been loved. She's probably been used most of the time. That's the first time she probably ever met a man who really loved her just for herself, not for him. Same thing with this woman. And it says when he went to look for her, what does it say? She was afraid. She was fear and trembling. She's probably thinking, oh God, I'm sorry I touched you. No, I'm not. And he says, daughter, take courage. It's okay. Your faith has saved you. Your courage and your faith has saved you. Thank God for the gift of our faith. So wherever you might be, some of you here tonight, maybe you're in a desperate situation. And you, like this woman, you spend lots of money on doctors. And you just maybe you're at your end of your rope. That's a good place to be. Because now he can step in. And just like this little girl who died, it seemed very final, but not to him. He says, little girl, rise. You see, there's nothing too big for God. No, there's no problem in your life or mine that's too big for him. He just wants you and me to know that you're loved, that he's not ashamed of you. I don't care what you've done in your past. He's not ashamed of you. Why? Because he knows his mission. He knows why he's here, that he came to show us the love of the Father. He came to restore us, to rescue us, to restore our friendship, our relationship with the Father as beloved sons and daughters. And that's what he did with this woman. He restored her dignity. She was able to get out of quarantine now. She could come back to church, right? You remember how good that felt when you finally could get out of that craziness and come back and see people again? And it's so nice to see your faces again without these silly masks on. I'm not making fun of those of you wearing masks, okay? So don't, just want to clarify that. I'm just saying it is nice to see people smiling again or frowning at me. I don't know what it is, which either one of you. When I preach a little long, I see frowns, but anyway. But that's really the message of the gospel. Is God's here to restore us. He wants to take all your shame, all your fear, all your infirmities, all your affliction, your pain, and he wants to take it from you so that you might live and be free. So be courageous. Do not be afraid. Just have faith.